Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Lynn Life. Well, it's Halloween season, and in this video we're going to show you how to use brake line to pose one of these 5-foot skeletons, especially when you want them to hold something like a sword in this case that has a little bit of weight. So let's get going. My name is Jonathan and I'm a caregiver for my wife Lynn, who has a permanent brain injury. Things are a bit different now, but we're doing the best that we can. Join us as we experience the Lynn Life. Over the last several years, I like to use skeletons, and I put them in different positions doing different things in our front yard for Halloween, just for fun. I really enjoy doing it. I look forward to this time of year. But this year I wanted to put them in a position where they're actually holding weapons. In this case, a shield and a sword. And my concern was, if you put them in that position, there's a little bit of weight, the arms are going to drop down. They aren't going to stay in that position. So I mentioned it to my friend and neighbor Lou, and he's an auto mechanic. And he said brake line would be the perfect thing to run, somehow run it through the arm, because you can bend it easily and it's still quite rigid. Now there's a couple options with running the brake line through the skeleton. In our case, I decided to run the brake line along the arms and zip tie them with white zip ties, because I want to be able to remove the brake line by cutting the zip ties so that I can store them at the end of the season. It also works really well in the case of this sword, so I could actually bend the brake line in a little circle and put the sword into it, and it's actually supporting the sword. Then I used a little bit of, a couple zip ties at the top and the bottom to really hold this sword in place. So it's doing more than just supporting the sword, it's actually holding the sword as well. First thing you do is you take your brake line, you want to measure how much you're going to be using. So I'm going to run it approximately down the arm here, then I'm going to have a bend here. Bend's easy. And he's going to bend along this arm. So if he comes here, get a little bit more of that. Oops. Approximately here. So that should do it. So you can see how easy you can bend it. Now I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to use these old pliers. They aren't very sharp, and they kind of crimp it. But if I bend it a few times, it comes off. Okay, so we're going to run the brake line across the shoulders like so. And at about the right area, we're going to bend this to go down the now this one's going to have to be longer. Wait a second, I have to run this longer, because this is the one, if I remember correctly, this skeleton needs to be left-handed, whereas the other one is just holding a shield. It's not as crucial. So I think that's about right. And so I'm going to place a zip tie actually up here at the shoulder. Okay, that's going to hold him. White zip ties, obviously, would be preferable. And I find that they seem to, even the silver brake line seems to hold pretty well, and it seems to blend in pretty good. Okay, let me get another one over in here. There we go. We're going to do that. Now I'm going to do the same on the other side. So this one doesn't have much to do. This side. This guy's going to be holding shield. And I'll bend this down here. So all we really care about here is this joint that has to be supported. On the other one I ran it a little bit longer, but I didn't have to. But it's very important over on this side to run a little extra in the case that I'm going to have this brake line here is going to be curled to support the sword. So that's important. Alright, now it's time to bend him, and I've already kind of put him in place, and that should do it pretty good. Obviously we're going to trim these ends off. You tighten them once you get into this. Just once you move them a little bit, some of this loosens up a little bit, but that should be good. And the whole point of this is to give this a little more rigidity, and it's definitely a lot more rigid than it was, because there's like little ratchets in here which kind of hold the pose, but as soon as you put a little weight on it, like even just the weight of a sword, they drop down. And there's something else here I'm going to do with the spine as well to give that a little strength, but we'll do that later. Now the next step would be to start working on the hand area. Okay, for this it's a matter of bending the brake line around using the pliers, and to make a circle. Last time on the other one I made too big of a circle. You gotta, here, Justin, can you hand me the sword? Just the sword? Yes. Okay. Justin's here helping me. And that's probably right. Great swords. Remember I got these at Spirit Halloween. These are like sort of Roman style swords. I thought they were pretty cool. So you saw us buy those if you've been watching. Okay, that's pretty good. And you can tighten it up again later. But now I gotta make it so that he's going to be holding it. Like that. Alright. Now these skeleton's hands aren't perfect, but they can bend. You can bend them around the handle of the sword, or is that called a, what is this? There's a hilt. Is this a hilt? Is this a hilt? Or is that a hilt? Leave in the comments, tell me what it is. But I know something down here is the hilt of the sword. Is this just the grip and that's a hilt? Don't know. But let's see. So if he's holding the sword like this, and I have him grip it with some, let's see, how am I going to have that? Something like this, and then I'll use the zip ties to really wrap his fingers around that, and then I'll tighten this brake line over here, and it should make it pretty tight. Okay, now I'm going to start cutting some of these zip ties off. Little tabs here. Another one here. And the sword should be pretty much done. Next we'll be working on the shield, but as you can see, this is rigid. This isn't going anywhere. It might flex a little bit, but it's not going to fall down, that's for sure. And the sword, pretty steady. It's there. So I'm happy with that. Okay, next we're going to put the shield in place. And there's just a little handle here. And generally a shield would run along the forearm. So that's going to be it. So it's going to be like this. Pretty easy. And we're going to zip tie that into place so that it stays the way I want it to. Doesn't always work out exactly, but let me see what we got here. Run it through here. Come on. Things don't always cooperate the way you want it to. But that's it. It's it. It's all pretty. Using white zip ties and that brake line really makes a difference. And they seems to work out pretty well. That would be it. I would hold that. I'll put another one in there when we stand them up, but that's pretty much it. Now for another area that's really important is the spine. It's the way these particular skeletons work, and I'll show you in a second. Okay, so I got the skeleton in a compromising position here on the operating table. Now I'm going to put a piece of this brake line along the spine, because here's an area that we noticed last year is an area that it could break. This isn't all one piece. There's actually three. You got the upper spine, which attaches to the skull up here, and you got this middle torso area, and you got the lower spine down here. And this area here, when you have some weight on top of the skeleton, on top as we will the sword and the shield, this is an area where it's a stress area, right? So I decided I'm going to put, and I'm not an engineer, but I'm just using common sense here, that I believe that this needs a little strengthening. So it's easy to do with this. So you just run a zip tie right here. Okay, and I think I need a larger zip tie right here along here. I knew that from the last one. Zip ties are very handy. They're like duct tape, right? You know, you gotta have a lot of them. Gotta have plenty of zip ties and duct tape, and then you can keep just about any household running with that. Okay, get this through. Okay, and good. Okay. So I'm going to run, I'll put a couple more along here, and this gives that a lot more support. And I'll show you again on the finished one that's standing. Now in this skeleton that we showed you earlier, it has that piece of brake line supporting. It's got a metal rod up his spine basically, and it gives him a lot more support. And while we're here, I'll show you, this is how I keep these skeletons upright. I just put a stake in the ground and run a piece of zip tie around the post, and they stay upright. I only have one on there now because this is not where he's going to be for Halloween. He's going to go out front, and we're going to show you that in our next video next week, so be sure to look when we actually show you the entire our whole display. So yeah, this is where it goes, and this really works well to keep them upright. I do put a screw right here in case the zip tie slips down. It only goes down so far, and that's it. So he seems quite stable, and we know from other years that they do stay up for about a month. We start around October 1st and it goes right through Halloween, and we're good. Well, that takes care of it for these two guys. There's a third one we got to do yet. He's going to be a little bit different yet, but you'll have to tune in next week when we are actually doing the whole display in the front of our house, and you'll see the finished display, and that'll be fun. Looking forward to that. We're actually shooting this on a Wednesday, and this weekend we'll be setting that up for the following week's video. And also, Lynn is doing very well. So many of you have been leaving comments. She's going in Friday to get the drain removed and all that, and but she's been good. There's no sign of infection. She's not really complaining about a whole lot. She's kind of, other than she is a little bit off when it comes to sleep and things like that. That's to be expected because she went through a lot. But thank you very much for all the comments. I had a friend from college call me today, asking about her. So I really appreciate all that. I do read all the comments to Lynn, so thank you very much. So, as my hat says, stay spooky, my friends, and we'll see you next time on the Lynn Line.